News out of Oregon this week. A woman punches her way out of a makeshift cell constructed by a man who shackled her, confined her, beat her, and sexually assaulted her. In Oregon, a woman punched her way out of a makeshift cell constructed by a man who chained her, sexually assaulted her, beat her, and imprisoned her in a cell in his garage. This woman was left in this cell, and we have the image of this cell up on the screen. There's a chair, water, a fan, and what looks like a makeshift toilet. I'm immediately conjuring images of Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs, and how many movies have we seen at Kiss the Girls where people imprison their victims for their own sexual gratification, playing out some sick fantasy. This is how it played out in Oregon, and what was discovered by the heroism of this woman who fought her way out, punched through a door, punched out cinder blocks to freedom in this man's garage, waved down a motorist, and led investigators back to this home. I want to look at the cell. I want to look at the man. I want to look at the breadth of his crimes. And that's what we're going to break down. Looking at this cell, I think as a prosecutor about the following things. Imagine the mindset of a man constructing this cell, buying the materials on any random day of the week, going to Lowe's and buying the cinder blocks, buying the materials to construct this facility, knowing full well that it will encase an innocent victim for their own sexual whims. I think that's part of the fantasy here. Building the cell, perfecting it, making it something that in his mind would have been inescapable. It's shocking and scary to think about the deliberate planning and the meticulousness that goes into that type of planning. This woman was kidnapped hundreds of miles away. She was a sex worker who and the gentleman's name, his current name is Negasi Zuberi. And we're going to talk about his name and his aliases in a minute. He made contact with a sex worker through Craigslist or an internet service, made arrangement for a meeting, and then posed as a police officer, shackled her hands and feet, assaulted her in the vehicle, then took her to his home hundreds of miles away where she escaped. If this crime doesn't scare the hell out of everyone, I don't know what would. But I look at this and I start to think about who is the man behind this crime? Who is Negasi Zuberi? And what happens is when you get an individual like that, and I've had them, folks, I've had these evil serial killer type people. I've prosecuted individuals like that. And you start to reverse engineer their lives because we have to pick apart what are the ingredients that went into the cocktail that makes Negasi Zuberi tick? And how did we miss, or did we miss, any signs along the way? How many times have we seen it? An interview with a neighbor of a serial killer. And what do they always say? He was a quiet neighbor. Nobody was ever seen going in and out of that house. That's not the case for Mr. Zuberi. This is someone who has been combative. He is a brutal domestic. His girlfriend and mother of two of his children has filed for protection from abuses, describing him in drunken stupors and violent drunken incidents where he breaks TVs, breaks windows, is violent, threatens to kill her and the young children. That's who this man is. This isn't someone who hid in plain sight and was a law-abiding citizen. This man was 29 years old, a young man. He lived in 12 states. At the age of 29, he's already taken, and he didn't just go into states and stay a while or stay for a short time. He stuck around. He would lease apartments, that he would move around. We're going to talk about why he would do something like that. So we look at the domestic situation, which was volatile. He was actually a plaintiff on Judge Judy, ironically, in 2019 against that very girlfriend. Judge Judy ruled in his favor. On the Judge Judy episode, which I have had occasion to view, Mr. Zuberi is in the courtroom. He's in a suit. He is in control. The entire proceeding, he presents himself well. He's extremely articulate, appears to be versed in courtroom lingo, enough that he impresses the tough and knowledgeable Judge Judy, and she rules in his favor. It was strange to see someone act in that manner, act that professionally. I mean, you could mistake him for a Philadelphia lawyer, a colleague, to be now charged with these heinous and violent crimes. So Zuberi is showing an ability to con. How someone can act that way in a courtroom and then act in this violent, tumultuous way when it comes to his victims. Also, someone capable of great manipulation. It is clear this is someone who wants power over his girlfriend, his children, and his victims. So in deconstructing this person's life, he's lived in Alabama, Illinois, New Jersey, Vegas, California. I mean, he's bi-coastal, this guy. And he changes his appearance. We're looking at some pictures of Zuberi. Now, if you looked at the image up on the screen, he is virtually unrecognizable. He is unkempt. His hair is grown out. His eyes look withdrawn in that photograph. If you looked at that man versus the man that appeared in Judge Judy, you would potentially not even be able to say it's the same person. I've seen other images of Zuberi where his hair is closely cropped. He's clean shaven. If you look at these types of images and you say to yourself, now we have someone who's moving around. We have someone who is regularly changing their appearance. Why? Because they're committing these acts across the country as they travel around. Changing his appearance limits his ability to be identified. It limits a consistency that victims can provide. He has now been implicated in at least 4 violent sexual assaults. So if I'm describing the person that assaults me, I say, his hair is long, grown out, he has a beard. Mr. Zuberi, short hair, clean shaven, can walk by an investigator and not change a thing and not spark anyone's suspicion. That's part of everything he's doing is clearly to facilitate his criminality, the moving around the country. And it's not like he has been a law-abiding citizen. His record is screaming out. First of all, his girlfriend has filed for protections from abuse and restraining orders against him. In those requests, she has written down the violent nature, the threatening nature, the destructive nature of this man. She's appeared in court and has supported those charges, so much so that a judge imposed that restraining order, which was later withdrawn, which, folks, you see, and you may look at this and say, why the hell would somebody withdraw a restraining order? Because, folks, this is about power. This is about manipulation. The second that restraining order is put in place over someone like Zuberi, who lives on power, his goal is not only to violate it, it's to get it lifted and to get his girlfriend to be the one that lifts it. And I am sure that's exactly what happened because I've seen it hundreds of times in my own career. It is a pattern and a cycle of abuse. It is a virtual hamster wheel cycle. And sadly, the individuals that are the victims of those types of personalities end up dead, broke or broken. And that is what I've seen time and time again. This is someone who abuses alcohol. Zuberi, he has DUI arrests. He has pulled guns on people. So he's also somebody who is violent with men and women. He is a bad neighbor. Every neighbor that they've interviewed so far, or every landlord that's been interviewed so far, all describe him keeping an apartment in states of disarray, blood on the walls. There's times he's pretended to be the landlord with his other roommates collecting the rents and then not paying the landlord. This is all manipulation of someone who lives many, many lies on a given day. In addition to his appearance and geographical changes, he has lived under aliases. He's Justin Hike. He's Sakima, which is another name. Again, these are efforts to hide his true identity. Why would someone want to do that? Because he cannot be traced at that point. He's someone that's off the radar, or he's on the radar under different individuals who look different, because he clearly understands he cannot quell these urges in his life. So in order to become a predator and prey on victims, he has to be bicoastal. He has to be undetectable. In fact, and let me tell you something, folks, we talk about the little things in cases. And as jarring as the image of that cell is, there are two items that have been recovered in this investigation that are extremely disconcerting and really shake you. Number one, he made a list. It almost looks like a to-do list. And folks, it looks like a to-do list that Mr. Kohlberger, our friend in Idaho, could have also kept. And basically what he says on his to-do list or plans is, don't leave your phone at home when you're going out essentially to commit crimes. Another thing he says, which the Long Island Beach serial killer, who has lately been arrested and discovered that we've talked about, he says, kill or go after victims that don't have a lot of people in their life, because you don't want an investigation. You don't want someone in his mind that's going to be immediately missed. And you may wonder, why are these people killing sex workers? Why is that a regular victim? Because you have to think about this, folks. I've prosecuted sex workers in my career. I've had sex workers that are victims in cases. When they make an arrangement to meet someone, they don't tell anyone else they're going out. They don't tell their mother and father, hey, I have a John I'm going to meet. So no one knows at that time in particular where they're at. They're not expected anywhere typically. Or they're living a life, sadly, beyond being a sex worker, where they're abusing drugs. And they get lost for a couple of days. So it may take a couple of days where they're even reported to law enforcement as missing. That is why they are an attractive victim to serial killers and serial predators. That's why this keeps happening over and over again. And that's why a person like the Long Island killer, or individuals we've seen in the past that are killing sex workers, BTK and people like that, those are the kind of, and even John Wayne Gacy, who was killing runaway youth, who were, many of whom were having sex in exchange for money. These were very, very ready prey for these predators. And if you look at Zuberi's case closely, it appears that's exactly what he was doing. And I don't doubt there is going to be a victim or victims in every state in which he's lived, because clearly these are urges he cannot control. He appears to have embraced them, quite honestly. He was found in Nevada, in Reno, Nevada. This woman went to law enforcement. He was ultimately identified and located in Reno, Nevada. Again, another state where he was found with his girlfriend and children in Walmart. And after a short standoff, He has been arrested, and he, as of now, is in prison in Reno, awaiting extradition to Oregon, where he will face the potential of life imprisonment for this crime, and what undoubtedly will be many others. This is a case, again, that we start to look at the mindset of these types of individuals. And what does it mean for a prosecutor to look at a case like this? You know, they could say, oh, it's a slam dunk. First of all, a real prosecutor hates that term. There is no such thing as a slam dunk. It certainly doesn't appear to be a whodunit. All right, so that's one aspect of a case. But as investigators and prosecutors right now, they are undoubtedly, and the FBI, who have put out a statement looking for other victims. And in that statement, they say Zuberi may have posed as a member of law enforcement. He may have arranged for sexual encounters with sex workers. They've released his images, his differing images, and they've released his aliases. Right now, investigators are reverse engineering this life, and they're putting it together piece by piece. That's not a slam dunk, folks. That is a very difficult process to go through. And the prosecutors and investigators are preparing search warrants. They're interviewing people, and they are reverse engineering this man's life. And I can tell you, when you encounter a life lived in this fashion, it takes something from you. It breaks you. It shakes you. It motivates you. But it does not leave you unscathed. I promise you. As disturbing as this stuff is to read, imagine having to process that cell. Imagine having to find maybe other cells in other places. He also, in addition to his little checklist of things to do, which I thought was cute, he designed a dungeon. What kind of a person? What's going on in the mind of a person that's designing a dungeon and is laying out these kind of plans? Your to-do list for your next day may include work out, take the kids to school, get to the office. This guy is planning on concrete walls, air circulation, and how to build an inescapable dungeon. And he's not the only one. We've seen this time and time again. What is this? What is this concept? What perversion are we appealing to here? How does this happen? And there aren't easy questions to these answers. So when people say it's a slam dunk, maybe it's a case that's going to be presented clearly. But I could tell you there is a lot of evidence that needs to be presented in this case. There's a lot of evidence that needs to be sifted through, and there are a lot of people that may be reluctant to come forward because they're afraid, or they're reluctant to admit lifestyle they were living and how they contacted Mr. Zuberi. And these are the kind of things that make a case very difficult. I'll also note, because Zuberi's been bouncing around the country so much, that's why you have the partnership with the FBI, whose jurisdiction goes across the country. You have what I've been a part of, which is called a multiple jurisdiction investigation. And when you have these investigations, I was part of the Brittany Drexel case, as many of you know, where we were in multiple states and multiple levels of jurisdictions and other cases. As great as it is to have the might of the FBI and several local police departments working together, there is prosecutorial competition. There's prosecutorial politics. There's difficulty in sharing information. Sometimes the FBI may conduct an interview in Utah, which is another state that Zuberi lived in, and an interview is being conducted by a local department in New York. And these two concepts can be married together beautifully and solve another case. But these individuals aren't in a position where they can share that information. So oftentimes, members of law enforcement have all the pieces of the puzzle. But imagine having a puzzle with a box of pieces here and a box of pieces 600 miles away. A little difficult to put it together. It's going to take time and patience. But I could tell you this victim that got away saved the lives, saved her life and the lives of ultimately what would be many others down the road. Undoubtedly, this guy would never have stopped until he stopped.